Hi, welcome to Coffee and Closers. I'm McArdle, and I want to personally invite you to join me and one of today's top performing sales stars for a cup of coffee and authentic conversation. And our collective goal is that you will walk away with tangible knowledge that you can apply to your sales efforts today. Are you ready? Grab a cup, fill it up, and let's get into another episode of Coffee and Closers. Let me officially welcome you to Coffee and Closers. Put your hands together. Woo! All right, thanks for coming out, you guys. Well, I'm McArdle. I'm going to be your host on this journey, and we have a very, very special guest today. So Kevin McArdle was a sales savage for 15 years at a health tech giant Cerner. But the last 4 years are what makes him very unique and very special, and why we wanted him on this show. He runs SureSwift Capital. Do you know what they do? Well, they make it easy for SaaS companies to sell their companies by buying them from you, right? In the last 4 years, they've acquired 32 companies. I'm going to say that again, 32 companies. And what makes them unique is how they handle the sales and the buyer process. We're going to learn a lot today. Put your hands together for Kevin McArdle. You betcha, man. Did you bring your jacket in case you get cold?
I hope so.
It's hot here this
I forgot it was springtime in Minnesota. We're under the bright lights and t-shirt day.
Yeah, well, dig it, man. It's a branded t-shirt. Never seen that one before in the tech community. All right, man.
I want to know who Josh's t-shirt guy, because I see sales reach all over WeWork today.
He pays them. No, anyway. So you've been to a few of these, right? So you kind of know where this goes. But here's the thing. You've kind of lived a tale of two lives. And I didn't know that prior to kind of, asking you to be on the show, and I got to dig into where you've been. You've had this successful 15-year sales career at a big health tech company. Mm-hmm. Now you're doing your thing. Would you mind kind of filling in the blanks? Tell us more about Kevin and how kind of sales has helped bring you here.
Yeah. So I was fortunate to get into a sales training program at Cerner, who you mentioned. And when I entered, it was 2000, and Cerner had 3,000 associates. They didn't use the term employee, it was associates. And I think 300 million in revenue. And when I left 15 years later, there were 20,000 associates around the world and like 4 billion in revenue.
Wow.
So I got into a company as a sales trainee when I maybe didn't deserve it. And they were on this amazing climb that now when you look at like Facebook and Google is slightly less impressive, but at the time they were like rocket ship growth. And it was the type of company that valued sales as a company. One of the company tenets was everybody sells, meaning whether you're the receptionist at the front door or the person in the mailroom or a developer, writing code, everybody is responsible for selling the company. And so that culture was something that I thrived in. And they were very good about giving the next job or the next responsibility to somebody who maybe doesn't deserve it or maybe hasn't earned it on paper, but they would, sink or swim, and if you perform, you kind of continue to level up. So it was just like really fortunate timing in terms of I stumbled into an excellent company. It was a culture that I could thrive in, and really fortunate timing. And so sales is what, eventually I got into sales leadership and, bigger jobs in sales, and then got into more operational roles. But again, everybody sells. So I was running a division where I was responsible for sales and customer happiness and development and, it's projects and stuff like that. But the top line was still critically important. And so it gave me exposure to a lot of different aspects of the business while still having that sales focus.
That's awesome, man. So incredible. So sales has been good to you.
It's been really good to me, yeah.
So then you go into, a dark room and come out a capitalist? Like, tell us the journey of 15 years.
Poof. Well, I guess you could say I was always a capitalist, but more formally.
What you've done, and I don't want to pump your tires too much, but I mean, we always handpick, guests that we think will bring value. And your story is so incredible to have that sales background and now live as now be on the buyer side. Could you tell us a little bit of how SureSwift came to be. So you kind of retired from that life, and you've given me crap for my corporate life, and now you're doing this thing. Could you tell us the story of where SureSwift came from? And
yeah, so after 15 years, and I hope you can hear, like I loved working at Cerner. It did a lot for me and my career and my family. But after 15 years, I was just ready to do something different. And along the way, I did nights and weekends and got an MBA, and that kind of gave me the bug for entrepreneurship myself, and I wanted to have my own business. And so I was in the mind frame of maybe considering other options, and I met a guy, Don, who's now my business partner, who had this idea for what is now SureSwift. And what you think is very interesting is really simple. The idea was just, let's buy profitable companies and operate them. The end. Like, that's it. There's no magic secret sauce or business plan. And for somebody like me who understood sort of like deal making, so to speak, or like getting to yes, I know something we've talked about and you talk about on the podcast, like that made sense to me. And it made, while I wanted to own my own business, I also knew that that was super risky, and I'm generally financially conservative. So this was like an interesting middle ground of, I can own businesses and just acquire somebody who's already done the hard work of creating a successful business. And as long as we have the capital, it's profitable from day one. So the risk goes way down of the thing completely failing. Yeah. What I was betting on, or what we bet on together, was my ability to operate businesses that other people had created. And fortunately, because of my Cerner experience, I knew a little bit about operating businesses. So that's kind of how the tale of two lives shifted into SureSwift.
That's cool. I can tell you from experience before I started doing companies with my wife, that most salespeople, maybe just myself, can have successfully operated some companies that I've started into the ground. So I think it's pretty rare when a salesperson can kind of join the operations side of things and live both sides.
Well, it's not risk-free. Like there was a chance, there still is a chance that we acquire a company and it performs poorly. But at least we're starting with a foundation of like really solid companies, well-built, well-run. We acquire generally bootstrapped companies that are run pretty lean and nice margins, highly profitable. So yeah, it was sort of a dream to own my own company, but I didn't really know anything beyond that because I don't have any like technical skills. I couldn't write code myself. I couldn't conceive of products like you and Ali have. So it was, again, sort of stumbled into this perfect fit for me where like I like finding opportunities, creating win-win situations with the seller. I like operating businesses. I like building teams, building culture, and I don't have to dream up some new idea because that's not my skill set.
That's awesome, man. So a question that I have for you, because we were talking on our prep call, it clicked, and you talked about, you've kind of mentioned that your last a bit here, but you're on this, so I'm going to assume that not all companies come to you. Right? They don't all come to you. And even the ones that do, you need to kind of sell them. You need to educate them on, hey, this may be good for you, mm-hmm. right? So you have a process, I'm assuming, for that. But then on the other side, you're buying, right? Yeah. So you just said it, there's got to be a process that you run to qualify and make sure that this acquisition or this buyout is going to be good for both parties, including yourself. So would you mind kind of explaining maybe your selling process and your buying process? Because very rarely do we get to learn how to sell like a buyer from someone who wears both hats.
Yeah, I never really put it in those terms until you sort of connected the dots. But my selling, you're right, we sort of have to sell SureSwift as a good home for the seller's company. It's going to get confusing if we continue to do this. But so if Ali's selling a company, and if it's a profitable, successful, well-run company, she has options. I am not the only option. I know that not everybody runs into people like me every day because there are fewer of me than there are salespeople or company CEOs or project managers or whoever's in the audience. There are fewer of me, but I'm not the only one. So somebody selling a company has options inherently. It's my job to, if it's a good fit, convince them that my company is a better home for their business than somebody else. And I use the term home specifically because people, not just me, but sellers who have sold us their business, compare it to having a child like go off to college. where they care that much about the success and it's that important. And when you, I haven't done this, but imagine sending your kid off to college. I'm putting that college responsible for taking care of my kid. And if something goes haywire, that college is dead to me. Do you know what I mean? So there's that much gravity with this decision. So my job, my process, is to try to just be as honest and transparent about how we do things as possible. And sometimes it ends up being not a fit, and that's okay.
When you start, sorry, I don't want to, you know me, man, I'm going to do this. I just get
Keep
curious.
Gives me a chance to have a sip of beverage from my really nice coffee mug.
Productplacement.com. Okay, so from that buying, when do you, I'd like to kind of dig a little, I want to get to the buying side of the process, but on that seller side, when do you bring that up to say, we're going to run through this, is it an exercise? Is it to say, let's go A plus B plus C equals, this is a dead deal, and we kind of kill out the maybe? Because that's kind of the theme of the show is, removing the maybe. Let's create deals where we can guide a hell yes or an absolute no. When do you introduce that kind of criteria in your...
Internally, we do that from the first moments. So more and more deals find us. Like somebody will, and we try to make it really easy on our website. If you're interested in selling a business to us, give us these small bits of information. And really quickly, we can tell if it's just not a fit because doesn't fit our portfolio. For example, like a purely services business. We don't do that. And we try to be transparent about what's a good fit and what's not, but sometimes things that aren't a fit come through, and we quickly, respectfully, not a fit for us. If possible, I say, I know somebody who it might be a fit for. Let me introduce you, or try to be helpful, like maybe call this broker, but quick no, because that's better for them, and let's not waste each other's time. And a quick yes, but it's usually yes and. So yes and could you tell me these 10 things that I don't know yet? And if that continues to look good, yes, and let's get on the phone together and get to know each other a little bit. And so we try to move through that process as efficiently as possible, not quickly, because we don't want to make quick decisions can sometimes be bad decisions, but just to be respectful of the seller's time because they have options. And I've been on the other side of this where like, oh, maybe, let me think about that. And then like 2 weeks later, it's a sales. You have to follow up and you follow up, and those maybes are often, it's no, but they're just trying to be polite or some weird thing. Like people think it's, they don't want to they think it's confrontational to tell somebody no, it's not a fit. But actually, no is the second best answer. Yes is the best answer, but no is the second best answer.
How many salespeople do we have here? Right on. How many founders? Cool, entrepreneurs. That is such valuable. I mean, all of us salespeople can say that, right? It's so much cleaner when you can just get to the no, and it doesn't hurt anyone's feelings.
Did I not just make that? I know I didn't make that up, but it.
I thought you made it up.
No,
boom.
Well, and it's really not about feelings. Like it's a business transaction, and I just said like a seller treats their business like a child. And that's true, but you're not saying your child is ugly. It's just not a fit for our home. Like.
Good thing I didn't bring my kids today, because Kevin would have called them ugly.
No, but that's what no is more respectful than maybe. If it's a true maybe, like you don't know, that's fine. But if you're just trying to not hurt somebody's feelings, it's actually less respectful than just saying no, it's not a fit for these reasons. Thanks for thinking of us. Yeah.
Now, from a buying side, because you kind of have that advantage. You're a buyer, so you've got some leverage, but you've been on the seller side, right? Could you describe kind of your buying process and how do they intersect? What have you learned from now being one of the few that have sat on both sides?
The biggest lesson I've learned is how important a transaction it is for the seller of a business. And maybe I should have been smart enough to figure that out. I've never built a business and tried to sell it myself, but it's most times a once in a lifetime deal where somebody's built a business over the course of 2 years, 10 years, however long you put your blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. Yeah. And for whatever reason, they decide they want to sell it to somebody. But that is a potentially life-changing financial transaction. It is a life-changing work event. So you go from being the founder and owner of this thing, whatever it is, to being, I sold this business. But now I maybe don't have the next business, and you kind of ride that wave of I sold a business and good for me, this is exciting, but then what am I going to do next? So there's a whole lot of really interesting psychology that goes into selling a business that I'm really just now starting to understand a little bit more through building long-term relationships with people who have sold me businesses and after the fact, because nobody wants to get into how stressful it is in the moment, right? Yeah. You buyer and seller, I try to be transparent and understanding, but there's also like we're not making a friendship here. There's a business relationship, but I have to be firm on like my buying criteria, what information I need, what concerns I have, et cetera, et cetera. And the seller is putting forward their best face of like, the business is perfect and there's nothing wrong and here's all the wonderful things that you could do with the business going forward. And
right.
Why wouldn't you like this business? And you should pay me double what you're proposing. And so there's a bit of a dance. And I, like you said, I am somewhat on both sides of that. I'm selling my company as generally a really good home for most people's SaaS business. But I know that it's not perfect. I know
right.
that we've got holes we need to plug. I'm confident in taking on somebody's business, but I don't position it as perfect, but you see what I'm saying? There's that dance. Only after the fact, and usually once everything's gone well, and the seller is able to like take a breath, then you can kind of have a conversation about like, wow, that was really stressful. And I couldn't tell you at the time, but like, this was my one shot to make a bunch of money and cash in on this, 5 to 10 years of work. And it's a big deal for people to sell a business. And unfortunately, there aren't a lot of like great resources helping coaching sellers through that process. There aren't a lot of great resources coaching me on this process. It's, especially in terms of buying and selling of digital assets, it's still a very immature field, unfortunately, with some bad actors in there. So it's a friend of mine uses the term, it's just messy. It's a messy endeavor.
Yeah.
I don't know if I even answered your question. I kind of went on.
No, what I asked, you write the narrative.
You're just reading what Allie wrote down anyway, right?
I just do what she says. You know that. So, just because we saw a lot of hands go up, right? And there's not everyone's going to be able to buy 32 companies in 4 years. Let's be honest, all right? Let's say you had to go back to Cerner for whatever reason, okay? So you have this experience now. How would you apply that to a corporate sales gig or a sales gig for any matter?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and I haven't thought about that in a long time. I thought about that a lot right when I was leaving.
Starting out?
And, I told, I didn't tell, my wife and I had the conversation. I told my boss at the time and some other advisors. I thought, well, worst case, like let's say it goes up in flames and I completely fail. I could probably call my friends at Cerner and they'd take me back. And I know, because we had this conversation as like a leadership group, that person, take me out of it. Somebody goes to start a business, if they come back, even if the business doesn't work, they're a more valuable person for the experience.
Right.
And we had that conversation about team members who had done it. So I knew that in my head, but I was still afraid of like, you don't want to make that call. You don't want to say, hey, this thing didn't work, can I come back? Now, would I come back? I would definitely be a more valuable person, and I would be a really bad employee.
Okay.
Because having been an entrepreneur, there are a lot of things that are really hard about it. Having all of the responsibility for everything in one place. And I have an amazing team, but ultimately I'm accountable for the success of the business. And that's hard and it's stressful and it's not for everybody. I applaud anybody in the room that is an entrepreneur. But the great thing about it is I make a decision and it happens. And I remember back in my Cerner days, and Cerner was actually a pretty entrepreneurial, fast-moving company, but like the smallest decisions take weeks or months to execute. And you have to, satisfy all sorts of different people with like, is this the right decision? And, is this the right person to do that thing? And I don't know that I would have the patience for it anymore, to be honest. And that impatience would translate into me being a hard employee to manage for whoever did it. So I would bring more value to any corporate environment. I believe any entrepreneur going back into a corporate environment, into a more traditional workforce, is more valuable just from the skills you develop in trying something new and having all the accountability in one spot.
Well, and I selfishly ask that for you guys, wink, but also for me too, as you know, I joined NetSuite, and so I always
knew
think,
that, but I didn't know if they knew that.
yeah, they probably don't. Nor do they care. They're here to see you.
They don't care.
They're like, who's the guy in that wacky shirt? Please. But in that interview process, I mean, we're talking 15 years, right, of pretty decent sales success, literally selling fintech for most of it. And they wanted to talk about all the companies that we've started and coffee and closers and all that kind of stuff. So I'm always curious as how that would translate. Not that you're planning on going back. I'm just saying if there's anybody here that says, hey, the worst thing I tried out for a couple of years, I bomb, but I bring that level of experience back to a company, I've learned that it's invaluable, right?
Yeah, you're living what I envisioned. Hopefully you'll be a better employee than I envisioned myself being. But yeah, it's hugely valuable. And that's why I'm such a fan of entrepreneurship, whether it's technology or otherwise. It just builds so many skills and muscles and, ideas that, it feels like it'd be great if everybody could give it a shot once in their life and not worry about it might fail. It might. But the rest of the world doesn't think of one's failure as much as we do. Most of the world would move, like, let's say SureSwift went up in smoke, tomorrow. I would feel horrible about that. It would eat at me for years. I would never forget it. Mm-hmm. All of these people would move on, right?
Right.
So if I went to somebody in the audience and said, look, my business didn't work out, could I come work for you? They're probably, yeah, you did that SureSwift thing and that didn't work out. Wow, that was unfortunate, but let's talk about your next thing, right? Like the rest of the world moves on. And so I think we frankly put too much on our successes and our failures because most people just don't care.
Yeah.
Our close friends and family want to celebrate our successes with us, and they feel the pain of failures with us. But I think what is spotlight syndrome, I think it's called. Like, we think the world cares about our stuff way more than the world actually cares about our
Imposter syndrome,
stuff.
isn't it? Is that what it is? Or
I think that's different, but I'm sure there's somebody smart
probably
in the
right,
room
though,
that
'cause I'm
can
the host.
straighten that out. Yeah, let's go with that. Like, thanks for the coffee mug.
All right. Speaking of coffee mugs, free coffee mug for anybody that asks a question during the Q&A, more about how he runs all these companies. This is a sales show, so I got to be respectful of our listeners at home. So I'm going to pivot to the sales operations side because rarely do we have somebody who had the success you had on the sales front who now is such a sales operations guru. Here's an example. You have acquired 32 companies in 4 years. In sales, time management is key. It's so important to be able to juggle deals that you're running, business development, making sure that all the legal and all that stuff is processed. I've ran a few deals in my life, but I've never ran 32 companies at one point. Cloning isn't legal in Canada, is it? No? Okay.
Staying away from Canada jokes.
They're coming. How do you talk about this time management, the sales operations, how you run 32 companies at one time? I mean, for the rest of us, that would be...
Well, so tying it back to sales, I will tell you the best salespeople I ever knew or worked with, and I had some success, but I don't put myself in that category. Like, I worked at people at Cerner that were just amazing and way more talented than me. The best ones were process driven. It wasn't, so like the movies are written about the like go champion a deal and build a great, nobody writes a movie about sales, but hypothetically, the fun stories are, I built this relationship with somebody and the deal died 4 times and then it survived and we're high-fiving at the end. And that might be one good story, but the people that build amazing sales careers are the ones that are process driven. And whether it's a deal that's 4 years out or the one in your windshield, everyone gets the appropriate level of attention, and they have a process, whether it's a written whiteboard or some software to help them. And it's like, I like to, so tying it back to SureSwift, me and my team talk about the machine. It has to be a machine that takes over and fills in the gaps for when the people forget things or when the people, aren't thinking about business number 32. The machine does. Do you know what I mean? So we work hard on process and systems to make sure that we never lose sight of any particular deal. Because I'm not special. I can't keep track of 32 in my head. I have an amazing team of people who are closer to each business. And ultimately, there is one person within SureSwift who is accountable for the success of every business.
Okay.
So we know if something's going great, we know who to give a high five to. If something's not so great, we know who to say, how can we help? And there's that single accountability, and they get the access of the entire team to help them. But it's more systems than personal aptitude of keeping things straight. Because I'm like you, I can't keep 32 things straight.
So just a live example, and you can share what you wish, okay? I don't know if you guys know this, but if you're in the tech community, you might have heard that SureSwift just acquired tech.mn. Put your hands together for that. That is amazing. It's been a resource to most of us, and I'm so excited to see what your team does with it. So if we could apply a process and system, again, share what you wish. I don't know if you're under. You just acquired that company. What does that onboarding process look like, and how do you plug in your systems, your processes into something like that?
Yeah, so that just happened like 2 weeks ago, week and a half. And this is an interesting case where two co-founders, Jeff and Mike, built an amazing business. Jeff's now running it, and he's solo. So first order of business is we need to try to replace all the work that Jeff was doing, which is technical, dealing with sponsors, pulling off events, but he's also a writer and an editor. So that's a lot that one person is pulling off. So we're hiring. If anybody wants to work for tech.mn, find me afterwards to do any one of those 4 roles. So in a normal case, if the business has a team, we onboard the team and make sure that they feel like they've got a soft landing spot and a good home within SureSwift. And we say, okay, whatever we're doing with the business, you just keep doing that. And don't think that we're geniuses and we're going to change process. You've got a good business, keep doing what you're doing. And then we start to offload the things that are headaches for the founder that they have to deal with because they're a solo entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. But we've got a machine that can deal with that, like hosting and finance and accounting and HR things and all those the messy parts of business that aren't the fun part but have to get done.
Right.
And then we slowly, over the course of weeks and months, try to get inside the founder side of like, okay, what have you tried in the past that didn't work, or what are things that you think we could do that you just never tried because you didn't have the resources or the time or whatever. And it's a process of there's that dance that I talked about of like getting to know the seller of a business to try to get a deal done. But then it flips to more of a relationship of, okay, now the deal's done. Let's take a breath. Tell me what you didn't want to tell me before. Or
what do you mean?
Well, like, if they say, we typically find these things in due diligence. Usually it's not scary. Here's an example, not related to tech.mn, but a lot of times sellers of businesses to us will say, I tried paid ads before. Like I tried Google AdWords, and I think it might work. I just didn't have the talent to pull it off, or I just don't understand it. And you need a PhD to understand how these things work. So I think maybe we could try that, and I could guide you, but I can't do it myself. We don't know enough. SureSwift doesn't know enough about that. So that's like that. Like maybe we work through that together. And it's not some scary thing that they were hiding during the transaction, but it's more of an opportunity that they say, "I'll help you try this if you want to try it." Does that make sense? So back to your question, how do we onboard? First rule is don't screw it up. We buy these businesses because they're successful, so we want to just not screw it up.
Well, that's on your end, saying to your team.
Yeah, my team. Yeah, like, we just have this wonderful business. Just don't screw it up. Like, take care of the team, take care of the customers.
That's cool.
Continue to develop the product, and don't think that we're geniuses and we're going to figure out something in 90 days that this seller didn't figure out over the last 5 to 10 years. Like, that's insane for us.
When did you come to this humble point? Because I'm sure you everyone kind of throughout their journey kind of comes in hot and reaches a point where they're like, all right, here's I'm going to settle. I'm going to be humble now. I mean, that's a pretty humbling approach, though, I think, is to say, you know more than we do. A lot of people don't think that way.
A lot of people don't think that way, but if you think about it, let's say so coffee enclosers, great model. Look at all these people that are here. Obviously, you've got something that works. For somebody to walk in the door and be like, you know what, Mikolai? You've got you got the wrong sponsors. The AV stuff doesn't make sense. You
take that personal, Eric.
Facing each other, not angled like this. And why is Ali taking pictures in the front row? It's very distracting. Like you look at that person like, you idiot. Don't you? You wouldn't say that because you're too polite. But I would say that. I'd be like, this is I built this business. I wake up every morning thinking about it. I fall asleep every night thinking about it. And all I've been doing is think about this business for 5 years. Who do you think you are to come in and know better than I how to run this business? People do that. People can, sometimes people put us in the private equity bucket, and they're famous for this. They've got all the, fancy MBAs or whatever, and, oh man, this dumb entrepreneur doesn't really know what they're doing. We're going to come in and fix everything. And I don't like that approach, because I think it devalues the entrepreneur who built a business. And my father was an entrepreneur. I just have been grown up with respect for that endeavor, regardless of the type of business. And I just think it makes more sense to assume that the person who's run a business for 5 years knows more than me. Like I guess that's humble, but I also think it's just like smart to assume that the business owner knows more than I do. And over time, we'll have some ideas and try to tweak some things and test some things and hopefully grow the business. But we don't go change a bunch of stuff right away.
That's awesome. Put your hands together. I love that answer, man. Because for those salespeople, and I'm guilty as anyone, you walk in and you have your book of knowledge, right? So you walk in and you think that you're going to fix their problems because you know your product, but you don't stop at a humble point to say, I'm going to assume I don't know anything. Let's just assume I know. I'm going to assume nothing, because I just got slaughtered on a call, one of my first sales calls the other day, thinking I've been in fintech forever. I know your pain. I don't know their pain, because the way that they experience that pain could be different than anyone else. I love that, man. So we're getting clipped for time. I apologize, and I promised you guys your time. So I got a question and a half to answer, okay? Something on this show, we celebrate the climb. We celebrate failure. And we're gonna exclude Canada from here, but we celebrate the climb, we celebrate failure. Has anyone here ever failed? All right, for those that didn't raise their hand, you should try it sometime. It's a gasp. But I'm assuming with your level of success and 32 companies and all this stuff, could you share with us maybe some marquee failures of something that you took on, it absolutely bombed, and what you learned from it?
Well, I guess you say 32 companies, but if you look at our website, there aren't 32 represented. So some of them didn't work out as planned. And so, like one example, and I look at that as, I'll give you one example that I think it related to SureSwift that is maybe a different story than most people would hear day to day. Before I tell the story, I'm going to make it clear this is my failure personally, and a failure of due diligence. Now let me tell you the story. So
nice tee up.
I'm gonna change the names to protect the not so innocent. But let's say a woman named Jill is selling us a business, and the business looks good, not perfect, but no business is perfect. And Jill has built the business herself, and Jill is actually a salesperson at heart, and decided Jill was going to create a better mousetrap to help salespeople do their thing.
Okay.
And she did, and hired developers and had a team, and just was ready to exit the business. And during due diligence, we kind of always try to understand the people, because we assume the people are going to be part of our team, so that's really important. And we see that Jill used to have a salesperson named Judy, and Judy worked for Jill for 6 months, and then she's off the P&L. And so it's important, and it was just like a few months ago. And so we say to Jill, the business owner, tell us about the people. And we see this salesperson here. What happened? And she says, well, yeah, I had been, most of the sales is just organic. People find us and they self-onboard, and it's wonderful. It's SaaS. It's perfect. Like, no effort. But I hired a salesperson just to see if we could sell more. And so I found Judy, and she seemed great, but just didn't deliver the top line that I was looking for. So I let her go, and we parted ways. Fair enough. Easy story, right? Judy didn't work out. It doesn't always work out. So a couple months into owning the business, I keep getting people asking for Judy. And I say, it was more my team in the day-to-day. Like the people on the help desk, customers are emailing in saying, hey, can I talk to Judy? Because she was really helpful in setting this up. And where's Judy? She's the one I usually deal with. And my team is like, what? Judy hasn't been around for a while. Like, she's not getting paid. She's off the P&L. So I'll jump to the punchline of the story. I can't prove it. My theory is Jill and Judy are the same person.
What?
But the business owner created a persona of a salesperson to be the salesperson, and when somebody asked for a discount, they could kick it up to the boss, and the boss could either say yes or no. It sounds weird, but I swear to God. So here's why
This just took a turn, and I like it.
Here's why I believe this to be true. So I emailed Jill, the business owner, and I'm keeping it straight in my head because these are not the actual names of the real person and I think the fake person. So I emailed Jill and I said, hey, people keep asking for this Judy person, and I know you said she moved on, it didn't work out, but I'd like to, email her and see if I could bring her back or just understand what she was doing. And the answer was very suspicious, something like, Judy's off the grid. I don't know how to reach her. And this was a couple years ago, but it's still 2017. It's really hard to go off the grid. You have to try really hard to not be found. And so that was when I was like, I screwed up. I missed something. And actually, thinking back, like in the conversations, there were times where Jill seemed to like maybe hiding something, but I wanted to get the deal done, so I pretended it wasn't an issue instead of like peeling back the layers and asking more and better questions.
Yeah.
So that one didn't work out quite as well as we'd hoped. Still profitable. I'm not going to tell you what business it is, but in the portfolio, maybe not one that we highlight on the website, but yeah, that stung a little bit because not only does the revenue take a hit and the profitability takes a hit, but we put out a bunch of capital to acquire this business, and that's capital that we can't use for the next one that would have been a better fit.
So where does that failure, and that learning experience sit in your continually updating onboarding process or your, discovery process of, oops, I'm going to look for that now in the future?
Oh, like how do we try not to make the same mistake twice? I now put a lot, and this sounds weird, and I would have never believed it when I first started down this path. I put a lot more stock in how I feel working with the founder than I used to. And that's something that's hard to measure, and it's like, how do you plug that into the process? It's just something we talk about with my team. If I get on the phone with a founder and I hang up the phone just not feeling good about the conversation or not wanting to work with that person for some reason, that might be a quick no.
Okay.
Even though the business looks, because I had that feeling with this particular founder that we're calling Jill. I hung up the phone, I was like, that felt kind of weird. And my technical guy at the time was like, yeah, that did feel kind of weird. But gosh, the business looks really great. I think we can do good things with this business. And now I would either quick no, or I'd figure out why did that feel weird, and we need to understand that issue a lot more. So I now gravitate toward, I like to say businesses take on the personality of their founder for better and for worse. We all have good things and challenging things about our personality and how we do business, and we don't try, but our businesses take on that personality. If you're detail-oriented, your business is going to be very buttoned up. If you're relationship-based, you're going to have great relationship with your customer, and neither is good or bad, but that is an indicator of whether that business will or will not be a fit with us. And so, and that's hard, that's messy, right? Trying to understand this founder, which it's not like you get to build a long-term relationship with these people most of the time.
Right.
Quickly trying to understand who they are as a person, how they built their business, how they will interact with us as a company, and then that has long-term implications of us potentially owning that business.
Wonderful. Sage advice. So I got half a question to ask.
Yeah.
To be able to acquire companies the way that you do and build all the stuff that you do requires a continuous knowledge base. I know that you've been on podcasts. I know you read a lot of books. Could you share kind of some podcasts or some books or some tools, things that you use in your everyday to help you be successful?
Well, a podcast that I was just listening to on the way here that is not necessarily, there are a lot of salespeople in the room. I'm sort of a business and finance geek. It's called Invest Like the Best. A guy named Patrick O'Shaughnessy does it. And the reason I recommend it is because it's not about picking stocks, and it's not about investing, hundreds of millions of dollars in, oil and gas or things like that. It's actually as much about life and allocating your time, investing your time in what interests you or what's going to make you a better human, as it is investing money. Okay. So it's an interesting one to check out. Not for everybody. I read business books like crazy. I'm trying to think of like the best one that I could recommend. I don't know. I apologize. I don't have a better answer for that. But yeah, novels bore me. So yeah, that's all I got.
I like paint by number books and comic
good.
books. So final thing is, you sell like a buyer now. You've lived on both sides. Is there any just final parting words for people here that are brand new to sales? How many brand new people just got into sales like the last 2 years? All right, so imagine that's you right now and living the life that you've lived. What's some sage advice that you could pass on to these folks?
Well, two things. One, sales specific, and this is not a new idea, but I would like to, hopefully somebody's told you this before, or you've lived this. If in a transaction, one person feels good about it and one person doesn't, that's a bad transaction. And I think a lot of people in my position, like I know a lot of my competitors, some I know personally, some I know by reputation, they're trying to get the best price possible or sort of like squeeze the seller. And that ultimately results in a seller who's upset and maybe doesn't feel good about their transaction. I would rather like overpay or be flexible on terms if it results in a good relationship. And this has happened. So 32 businesses, many of them find us, and guess how they find us? You know, I buy a business from Joe,
Yep.
and Joe tells all his friends, I had a good experience with SureSwift. So, you know, saving 10% on the deal is worthless compared to those relationships.
Amen.
And the goodness that comes from treating people right. So, you know, the cliche is the win-win situation, but it's really true. If both parties walk away from the table and go tell their best friend or their spouse, like, this was awesome, it was such a good deal, then that's a perfect transaction. And kind of back, I thought of this when you were asking, like, what if I went back to Cerner? And this is more business or life advice, I think, but I could have used this as my younger self, is to care less what other people think of you. And I don't say care not at all, because I think that's near impossible, but I think about times where I was making hard decisions in my life about, like, do I take this job or that job, or you know, do I go to business school or do I not? And I don't regret a lot of the decisions I made, because, you know, it's all generally worked out pretty good. I have a happy life, a great family. I love where I live. I love what I do. But I think back, I put a lot of stock in what other people thought of those decisions, whether it was coworkers or extended family members or even like my parents. And I just think that is really not helpful. And so now I care a lot less. Like if my business went up in smoke and I wanted to go do something else, I would feel bad about this. Is kind of what I would feel horrible about that.
Yeah.
But I don't really care what, you know, Susie in the back thinks about that. Even though it might be like big news and, oh my gosh, this business went to shit and Kevin's a failure, I care about the people in my house, what they think about it, my wife and my kids. But I kind, and it's maybe easy for me, right? Because I own my own business and I don't have to care what other people think maybe as much as in a corporate context where you sort of have to care about your corporate reputation a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's healthy for us to care less what other people think of what we're doing and make decisions based on what you and just the nucleus closest to you think are important of what you want your life to be about.
Well, it's easy to do when you do the right things consistently, and that's what you've done, man. You've built a great reputation. We're very fortunate to have you here today. Put your hands together for Kevin. So what do we think? What'd you learn? Well, if you like that, check out coffeeclosers.com for upcoming episodes, recordings, and more. And don't forget to check out our sponsors. Each one has been hand-selected. They are best in class. Until next time, we'll see you at the next Coffee and Closers. Cheers.
Say live, come on live a life we love. Gotta live, I said live a life we love.